The nafs is a very rich dimension of Sufi psychology, and of course a whole course could be done exploring the nafs, and it's our intention to have a subsequent course to this, exploring the nafs in greater detail in a series of lectures. But in what will suffice us for this Sufi psychology introduction is to explore the three domains of the nafs that are often discussed, and really explore what that means and what that means for us as seekers on the path. So it should be noted that the word nafs means the self. It can also be translated as soul, but I think self is probably the best way to do it. Now, I'll try as much as I can to use the word nafs as a technical term, because it's not really easily translated by any specific English term, and we'll explain why. Now, when nafs is used in the shorthand, nafs usually means something that is the ego self, you could say, or the lower self. Right? We might say, my nafs got the better of me. Right? I was being very nafsi, I was being very selfish, is how we use it. But that is a shorthand to refer to the lower self, which is called the nafs al-amara bisu, the self that commands, or the self that commands to evil. But there are many levels of the self, and many of them are beautiful and great, and not all of them are that lower self. In fact, of course, the indication of it being the nafs al-amara is that it is a type of illusory self. It is the false self that we identify with, but that our true self is actually luminous and beautiful. And we have this term, this Quranic term, the fitra, which is, you could say, the primordial self, or the primordial disposition, which is our highest self and is light. Now, we mentioned previously about the ruh, that our true identity, our true nature is spirit. And that, of course, exists before this world, and before being embodied in this animal body, in this spacesuit made of flesh that allows us to breathe this atmosphere. But we really should consider that from the Sufi perspective, we are spirits embodied. We're spirits having a human experience. And some people think, right, I want to have a spiritual experience. And so I go to this gathering or this retreat, etc. But from the Sufi perspective, we are spirits having a human experience. So if we're truly aware and truly present, everything that we experience is spiritual. And even the material world and these, every aspect is somehow connected to a higher spiritual world, even if it's quite dim how it's connected. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنَ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. They ask you about the spirit. Say, the spirit is from the divine command, Amru Rabbi. Interestingly, the name Amara also indicates command. And so this sets up a fundamental tension in the human being, is that we have this spiritual nature which is calling us to perfect surrendering to the divine presence, and calling us to ascend to our true nature. But we're not angels. We're not beings without a lower self. We actually have another command. And this command is calling us to selfishness, to egotism, to putting our interests above the interests of the greater good, to all of the vices that manifest from the human being. These are the two poles that each one of us has. And this sets up the fundamental tension of the human condition. Now, the nafs al-amara is the evil commanding self. But don't just think of it as the self which is commanding you to do evil works or to rob or cheat or steal. It's not simply that. The nafs al-amara is that self which feels separate, which feels that it is a drop, an individual isolated drop that has no relationship to the other drops nor to the ocean, right? In Rumi's analogy. Whereas the spirit feels itself as a drop in the ocean. Right? It feels oneness, it feels unity, it has an awareness and experience of the divine reality from which it is from. So the nafs al-amara doesn't feel this at all. It feels cut off. And the archetype of this nafs in the Quran is Pharaoh, the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh is, of course, a great tyrant, and to the point where he actually commands people to worship him. Ana rabbukum al-a'la, I am your Lord Most High, he says. So this is this little Pharaoh, or this little tyrant in each one of us, and at the root of it, it wants to be worshipped beside God. It wants to be the God. It wants to be the deity. And so, in a certain sense, from the Sufi perspective, the purpose of existence is to surrender to the divine will and to draw near. And that part of us, which doesn't want to surrender to the divine will, but wants its own will and wants its own command and wants everyone, in fact, to worship it and it to be the center of attention. Right? That is nafs al-amara. And this really, every negative trait, every evil and harm and darkness that manifests in the world, it comes from this.